is restoring Wall Street finance to its proper role as enabler of the real economy, rather than its master. The people in this room don't need any reminder of just how imbalanced our economy has become, but consider just the fact that a single hedge fund manager, in this case Ken Griffin, made $1.7 billion last year.
That ain't right.
That ain't right.
More in a single day than a minimum wage worker would make in more than 300 years, which is more than 100,000 days. Second, that widespread public anger at Wall Street's power and influence and frustration at rigged rules of the economic game, which leave more and more people struggling and often do the most harm to the people with the least wealth and in communities of color. And the visibility of that anger and frustration this election year create a tremendous opportunity and demand for action. And third, that we need to take advantage of the moment to engage and mobilize people around the country to tell the story of the harm done by out-of-control finance, to lay out a set of policy priorities that would rewrite the rules in favor of the rest of us, and to hold leaders and lawmakers accountable for taking the public interest side and joining us in fighting for these changes. So we're launching this campaign in Washington right now, but we're setting out to work together on it around the country. Today, many of us are also kicking off a giant round of online coordinated communication that will reach millions of people. And not too long after that, we'll be holding a teletown hall with many thousands of grassroots leaders. And you'll also see the first of what will be a series of creative actions drawing attention to the painful consequences of Wall Street abuses. And there'll be more to come after that. Before I turn the podium over to Senator Warren, I want to list the current participants in the campaign. We expect there'll be more, but they are right now the AFL-CIO, the Alliance of Californians for Community Empowerment, American Family Voices, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, the American Federation of Teachers, the American Postal Workers Union, the American Federation of Government Employees, Americans for Financial Reform, Campaign for America's Future, Catholic Alliance for the Common Good, the Center for Popular Democracy, Citizen Action New York, Communications Workers of America, Consumer Action, the Courage Campaign, Daily Kos, Democracy for America, Economic Policy Institute. There's a game at Passover we play in our family that's a little like this. Friends of the Earth, Hedge Clippers, Institute for Policy Studies, Global Economy Project, the International Union of United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, Media Voices for Children, Move On, National Education Association, Network, NYC Communities for Change, the other 98%, People for the American Way, People's Action Institute, Presente, Public Citizen, Roots Action, the Service Employees International Union, the Strong Economy for All Coalition, the Nation, the Root Strikers that Demand Progress, Unite Here, Working America, and the Working Family Party. And now it's a pleasure to introduce, and an honor to introduce Senator Warren, whose incredible leadership in calling out Wall Street domination of our economy and of our politics, and in laying out a vision for change are so inspiring and such a tremendous amount of part of what makes it possible, for me at least, to imagine that we can actually win the battles for a more just financial system that we're talking about today.
Good.
Senator Warren.
Thank you. Very much. It's so good to be here. Thank you for the introduction. I just want to say, and thank you for your outstanding leadership for Americans for Financial Reform. Thanks for all you do. Hard work to be done every day. It is good to be here with so many people who are committed to strengthening Wall Street reform. People who are committed to building an economy that works for all of our families. I am glad to be in the same corner with all of you because let's face it, Washington works great if you are a big bank with armies of lawyers and lobbyists. If you have zillions of dollars to sink into campaigns and super PACs. It works great if you like the revolving door between Washington and Wall Street that spins so fast it could make you dizzy. And the only way that is going to change is if we fight back. We are here today to talk about Wall Street reform. So, here we are, nearly 8 years after the financial crisis, more than 5 years after we passed Dodd-Frank financial reforms. And where are we exactly? So if you will, bear with me for just a short history lesson. I promise I'll keep this quick. But it's important because to judge Dodd-Frank, to see whether or not it has been a success, we need to compare it to the last time the economy crashed, 1929. So back then, policymakers saw what was wrong and they made three big changes. First, we put a cop on Wall Street, right? We created the SEC and we told them to enforce the rules to keep the playing field level. Second, we made it safe to put money in banks. FDIC insurance meant that no one lost a hard-earned paycheck in a bank failure. And third, we separated boring banking from the high-flying Wall Street investing. And that was Glass Stegall, so that the banks couldn't use FDIC guaranteed money in grandma's checking account to pump up their profits with high-risk trading. Three things, and for half a century, those rules worked. There was not a single major financial crisis. Regulation can work. We have to remember that. Because then, right around 1980, the political wind shifted. Deregulation was the watchword of the day, or to put it more bluntly, fire the cops. Not the cops on Main Street, the cops on Wall Street. Regulators looked the other way when big financial institutions found more ways to trick people on credit cards, on mortgages, on home equity lines of credit. I hope you all saw The Big Short, right? Everybody in here saw The Big Short, you bet. And you saw in that how the credit rating agencies signed off on billions of dollars worth of fraudulent mortgages so that pension funds bought them, so that towns bought them. And the consequence was they thought they were buying something that was safe, but they were not. And finally, the wall between high-risk trading and boring banking was knocked down, and Glass Stegall was repealed. Now, what happened? When the cops were blindfolded and the big banks were turned loose, the worst crash since the 1930s hit the American economy. And the moral of this story is pretty simple. Without basic government regulation, financial markets don't work. And the cheaters skate free while a lot of good, hardworking people get hurt. So that means it comes to us to get this right. The rules that protect our economy boil down to just two basic principles. The first one, financial institutions shouldn't be allowed to cheat people. I know that that's controversial in some places, but I want you to think about it. When giant financial institutions are allowed to build their businesses around a model that cheats people, not only are those folks ripped off, but over time, it puts the whole economy at risk. And second, financial institutions shouldn't be allowed to force taxpayers to bail them out. The repeal of Glass Stegall meant that stock traders could gamble using the money in grandma's checking account. And the TARP bailout is the reminder that when banks get too big to fail, then we all pay. Now, the departure from those two basic ideas, no cheating and no pushing the risks onto taxpayers, caused the 2008 financial crisis. And when judged against these two ideas, we have made a lot of progress under the Dodd-Frank financial reforms, but we've also got a lot more to do. So first, let's evaluate it. No more cheating, people. Dodd-Frank took a powerful step toward honest markets with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That's what it did. We now have one agency focused on weeding out the tricks and traps in mortgages and credit cards and student loans and other financial products. That little agency has already forced the largest financial institutions in this country to return more than $11 billion directly to people they cheated. Now that's government that works. That's right. But the big banks and their friends in Washington are doing everything they can to weaken and water down the CFPB. They spent money on ad campaigns, attacking me, attacking Bridge Gordry, attacking the consumer agency. On the last anniversary of Dodd-Frank, Ted Cruz introduced a bill to repeal the CFPB in its entirety. And we can all laugh, but boy, what this makes clear is we better be ready to fight back. Second, the Justice Department and the SEC need to get serious about prosecution against institutions and executives who break the law. Bank regulators don't take financial institutions to trial ever, which means that nobody's ever threatened with jail time. They just pay a fine and move right on. And violating the law becomes just a cost of doing business for a big financial institution. We need regulators who work for us, not for the institutions they're supposed to regulate. That's exactly what. And then third, remember something. More than a quarter of all families have no checking or savings account. These families typically rely on payday lenders and check cashing, which can trick and trap people into paying rates they cannot possibly afford. Now, the CFPB is busy working on reining in payday lenders, but we could do something really innovative here. Let the United States post offices offer basic banking services, bill paying, check cashing, small dollar loans, so that hardworking people don't have to rely on the payday lenders who rip them off. It is good for families, it's good for the post office, and it's good for postal workers. Let's do it. Okay, that's 3 on the no cheating. What about our second goal? And that is no too big to fail, no pushing risks onto the taxpayers. Well, Dodd-Frank imposed some discipline, but let's get real. Dodd-Frank did not end too big to fail. If you think it did, stand on your head, because you are looking at the world upside down. Look at the facts. Many of the big banks are bigger than they were when the economy crashed in 2008, and we were told they were too big to fail. At the end of 2014, they got the law changed so that they could bring $10 trillion in risky derivatives into their banks. And 2 months ago, the Fed and the FDIC declared that 7 of the largest banks in this country were so big and so dangerous that if any one of them started to fail, they would bring down the whole economy unless they got bailed out again. Too big to fail still stalks this economy. So, what should we do about it? We need to work on ending too big to fail once and for all. First, break up the big banks. Break them up. We need to reinstate a 21st century Glass Stegall Act. It will break up some of the biggest banks, and it will separate boring commercial banking from risky investment banking. Now, I've introduced a bill with Senator John McCain, with Democrat Maria Cantwell, and with Independent Angus King. We are ready to go. We just need help fighting for it, and that's part of the reason I'm here today. And second, stitch up some tax loopholes. Let's start with executive compensation. Our tax code has a crazy loophole that rewards giant payouts for bank executives even when their institutions break the law. That is how J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon just got a $7 million pay raise last year, subsidized by the U.S. taxpayer. We can close that loophole. We can do that. Yes. And another loophole, the carried interest loophole. In 2014, the 25 top earning hedge fund managers collected $11.6 billion in pay. 25 people, $11.6 billion. And these fund managers still get a special tax break. Instead of paying at the ordinary rate that you and I pay, they get a 50% off coupon on their taxes. Now, when 25 hedge fund managers don't pay their fair share on $11.6 billion in earnings, everyone else is left to pay the difference. We can close that loophole. We can close that. Okay, and just one more. I can probably do this all day, but just one more. Financial transactions tax. Michael Lewis, the author of The Big Short, wrote another great book called Flash Boys. If you haven't read it, I strongly recommend it. It was about how high-frequency traders use gimmicks to make big bucks, and at the same time add a lot of instability to the economy. We could pass a sales tax that doesn't hit mom and pop investors, but that targets high-frequency traders, and we can make our markets a lot more honest and a lot more stable. So there it is, 5 changes. Postal banking, Glass Stegall, executive compensation, carried interest loophole, and a financial transactions tax. 5 changes can make a real difference on Wall Street and a real difference in this economy. They can help protect hardworking families from cheats and liars. They can help rein in the recklessness and greed on Wall Street. They can end too big to fail. But most of all, these changes will make our financial markets stronger and healthier and give working families a fighting chance to build a real future for themselves and for their children. Now let's face it, this will not be an easy fight. Wall Street has money, plenty of money. They have money and they have access to a lot of senators and a lot of congressmen. But we didn't take on this fight because it's easy. We took on this fight because it is right. And that's why I'm here with you today, and why I am glad, why I am proud to be part of the Take On Wall Street campaign. We are in this fight because someone has to be willing to fight back, and that's us. If we fight shoulder to shoulder, we will win. We are partners in this one all the way. Thank you.
So it's now my great privilege to introduce President Trumka of the AFL-CIO. He and the AFL have been really at the front lines of fighting for financial reform over these last years. And he and the institution he leads have brought so much weight and expertise and so much understanding of how fundamental the organization of the financial system is to how well or badly regular people fare in our economy, that we really would not have made the progress that we have without their leadership. Thank you so much.
Thank you. First of all, let me say good afternoon, and on behalf of the 12.5 million working men and women of the AFL-CIO, I'm very, very proud and honored to be here to kick off this campaign. I want to first thank Senator Warren for her incredible leadership on financial reform and, quite frankly, on all of the issues that are important to working people. I can say that we have no greater champion than Senator Warren. We appreciate her very much. And I also want to thank all of our outstanding partners who are here. This is really a team effort and a great team to be on. So today is about rewriting the economic rules. It's about making our financial system the servant rather than the master of the real economy. See, for too long, Washington has reacted to crises instead of preventing them. A bridge falls down and we rebuild it. our economy crashes and we try to dig our way out of it. And sometimes being reactive is valid and very, very necessary. The Dodd-Frank legislation enacted in the wake of the Great Recession really was a good first step. Because as Elizabeth said, it has reined in some of Wall Street's most reckless practices and brought some newfound stability to our financial markets. But it was designed only to deal with acute, urgent problems. Now, at this time of, I'd call relatively economic calm, some are tempted to say, well, that's good enough for government work. But it really isn't. It's not. See, we can't sit back when it comes to the economic security of working families. It's time to go on offense. The rules should be written by and for the people who live in the economy, not the billionaires who live off the economy. And here's why. A report released last week by the AFL-CIO, a wonderful institution, if I say so myself, showed CEOs make 335 times more than the average worker. The UC Berkeley Center for Labor Research and Education estimates that manufacturing workers and their families currently receive over $10 billion a year in safety net programs that their low wages qualify them for. And another national survey found that 63% of working people don't have enough savings to cover a $500 car repair or a $1,000 medical bill. See, the status quo is not working. And that's because, by design, many of our economic and financial rules were written for and by special interests, wealthy special interests. And even in the case of Dodd-Frank, too many critical decisions were left at the hands of regulators. You see, we need a bigger and a bolder approach. And the proposals at the heart of our campaign: taxing Wall Street transactions, ending too big to fail, restoring Glass Stegall, making CEOs and hedge fund managers pay their fair share, and providing safe and reliable banking options to all Americans will drastically improve the way financial services function in this country. That means more money in the pockets of working families and hundreds of billions of dollars to boost our economy. See, we're going to fight for these reforms here in Congress and out on the campaign trail. It's time for Wall Street to serve Main Street and not the other way around. It's time to invest in America again. Infrastructure, jobs, education, technology, you name it. And we simply can't do that without a 21st century financial system that puts workers and consumers first. So all I have to say is, let's get started. The job's in front of us and we'll get it done.
President Trumka. So next, I'm glad to introduce Representative Ellison, who represents Minnesota's 5th District, and even gladder that we all have Representative Ellison as a senior member of the House Financial Services Committee, standing up again and again, every time, against predatory lending and against Wall Street abuse. The more attention you pay, the more you know just how much better off we are because he's there. Representative Ellison.
How about it for President Trumka, you guys? Leading from the front, you know, not the back, the front. So, in the whole history of humanity, there have always been presidents and dukes and earls and nobility and sultans and warlords. In other words, powerful people who could do what they want for the people who actually worked. And along comes democracy, though. And in the democracy, all of us get to come together and make rules that them dukes and them earls and them sultans have to abide by. That's what democracy's about. The only reason we have democracy is so that the ordinary people can tell the big and the mighty what they have to do. They cannot pollute our air. They cannot kill our jobs. They cannot send them overseas because we can make laws that say, no, you can't. And it works just fine unless we don't participate. And it works just fine unless they can use their money to manipulate, deceive, and distract. And let me tell you, they have figured out that if they can distract us, suppress us, deny us, and trick us and lie to us, then maybe they can manipulate this democracy thing to their favor once again. Well, the idea of fighting back Wall Street is that, no, we're not going for it. Not this time. The idea of taking on Wall Street is that us regular folks, you know, the folks who make the cars, the folks who clean the building, the folks who teach the classes, you know what I mean? The folks who run the pipe and the wiring, we are going to use our democratic prerogative to make the high and mighty on Wall Street obey the laws in the interest of the public, not themselves. That is the basic concept. So we need a resurgence of democratic participation. We need a resurgence of activism. Yeah, we need to get out on the picket lines, of course, and we also need to march and might even need to sit in, may even need to get arrested sometimes. But we also have got to be writing the rules. And we also need to be talking to our neighbors and telling our friends that this is our democracy, this is our air, these are our jobs, this is our country, they're our airwaves, and the people who try to profit from them are going to act like they are ours, the public's property. And that's what's going on today. Let me tell you, these people are trying to rule our political system with their money. They're trying to get us to pass rules to help them make more money, which they use to influence our political system even more. And the time for that is absolutely over. But it's going to take fierce and committed leadership, particularly from our union sector. You know, my man, President Trump, thank you for being here and thank you for all you do. I want everybody in this room to know, when we were fighting off Trade Promotion Authority, and we put up a good fight, and we may win this battle yet. Mark my words. Some people who wanted to push this Trade Promotion Authority, you know, literally get Congress, the representatives of the people, to hand over their constitutional authority to the president, which, by the way, they need that law because if they didn't, the constitutional authority is in Congress, right? It's in Congress because that's where it belongs. It's in Congress. You can take the smile off. You couldn't get eye face when I saw walk through that door to stand up and represent the people of America and talk about how trade was impacting us. But it's bigger than trade, isn't it, Rich? It's also about financial reform. And I'm on the Financial Services Committee, brother, and every single day, a day does not come. The doors do not open when they're not in there trying to take down everything to protect the American consumer. I want you to know that the Consumer Financial Products Bureau has returned, and I got to look at my stuff to make sure my number's right, over $12 billion to the American consumer. $12 billion. $12 billion to veterans, right? $12 billion to student, Congressman Velasquez. $12 billion to minority buyers of cars who were jacked up more because they were minorities and women. This is why we need financial reform. Yes, Richard Trumka can kick their butt and make them pay you more during the day, but when you get off work and you go to the store and you want to buy something, they reach in your pockets. We've also got to have some defense as consumers too. You know, I joined together with some other folks, Bernie Sanders is one of them, but there's many others. And this Inclusive Prosperity Act would restore the financial transactions tax of this country, which would generate $300 billion a year in revenue. This could make the days come to an end when Nydia and I are trying to scrape together pennies so we can keep a Head Start program. This could bring to the end the days when Nydia and I and other members of Congress are fighting to keep Meals on Wheels alive. Meals on Wheels, man. They want to cut Meals on Wheels. Oh no, don't tax us big high rollers. Cut Meals on Wheels. Cut Pell Grants. Cut research to figure out how to do something about your mother's Parkinson's. Cut research on how we're going to deal with your father's Alzheimer's. Cut that stuff, but don't mess with my money. Boy, oh boy, they redefine greed every day, don't they?
Yes.
But we can't stand for it, and we will not stand for it. And we are the many, and they are the money. We are going to win this fight if we stick to it. If we don't back down, we will be able to take care of business. And I'm telling you, just like we have excise taxes on risky behavior, you know, alcohol and cigarettes and stuff like that, it makes sense to put excise tax, a small one, 50 basis points on stocks, 10 on basis points on bonds, 0.05 basis points on derivatives. That is less than a mother would pay in the sales tax on groceries. That is less than a father would pay on new school clothes for kids. A trade of $10,000 in stock would pay a tax of 50 bucks. And for a $10,000 on a bond would be $10. And this is a wafer-thin tax which enables us to raise revenue we need to strengthen our families and our communities and our nation. And let me just tell you, it would help our markets. It wouldn't hurt them. A financial tax would restore financial markets to productive job-creating investments. A financial tax would create jobs by investing in infrastructure, and education, and health. A financial tax would provide assistance to people who are suffering in poverty all around the world. And also, it could address climate. A financial transaction tax would be a good thing. And it would help this nation. And more than anything else, it would remind Wall Street that it is the prerogative of the people of the United States to make them abide by regulations that are good and in the public interest. It will remind Wall Street that the people of the United States are the ones who decide what tax and how much they're going to pay. And we have got to claim this prerogative and this authority for ourselves. Because after all, this is a democracy. This is a democratic country. And democracy means rule of the
People.
the people. So people, get ready to rule.
Thank you, Congressman Ellison. Good afternoon, my name is Margaretta Strand. I'm the Vice President of Public Citizen. And we are so proud and so excited to stand with all of you in this room and across the country today to have launched the Take on Wall Street campaign to champion greater fairness in our financial system and to counter the outside influence of big banks and other special interests that have rigged our economy, fattening their pockets at the expense of working people. For 45 years, Public Citizen has been on the forefront of fighting corporate power. We've been tracking the huge amounts of money that's flooding our policies, our politics rather, and we're advocating for solutions that protect consumers. And we will be working with all of our allies in Congress and in the streets and around the country to build a massive movement of educated and engaged citizens to take on Wall Street. But we also know the importance of really having strong allies in Congress to do this. And that's why I'm so pleased to introduce Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, who is a tireless advocate for consumers. She's a fighter for small businesses, the real job drivers in this economy. And as a native of Puerto Rico, she knows firsthand the devastation caused by rampant Wall Street speculation and greed. Congresswoman, thank you for being here. Welcome.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction, and what a great pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you for everything you do to make this country a more just society. So I am glad that I am given the opportunity to talk to you about Puerto Rico. But first, let me thank Americans for Financial Reform and all of the participants for organizing this important campaign. Now more than ever, the Take on Wall Street agenda is critical for all Americans. And by all Americans, I also mean those in Puerto Rico where I was born. Our island is facing a debt crisis of epic proportions, and the fingerprints of Wall Street greed are all over it. There is a lot of blame to go around. The island's government, the US government, but also investment banks, mutual funds, and hedge funds that enable and advise the island to take on more and more debt. In the end, some of them make millions in fee advising the government, while others are now pushing the island into a humanitarian crisis. Puerto Rico has already cut essential services in order to slash public spending. Funding for law enforcement has dropped 3 years in a row. 200 schools have closed, and the territory cut health spending by $42 million this year alone for an island with 3.5 million people. The island defaulted on a bond payment on May 1st of $422 million and faces another $2 billion payment on July 1st. Yet, the hedge funds have called for even more cuts to education, healthcare, and workers' wages and benefits. They even proposed that Puerto Rico sell $4 billion in government buildings, sell $1 billion in port assets, and increase tax collection by $1 billion a year. Puerto Rico has the highest sales tax in the nation, almost 12%. In other words, they would rather squeeze blood from a stone, extracting any cash they can find on the island, than let Puerto Rico restructure its debt. And now, Puerto Rico is the unfortunate poster child of what can go wrong when you put your trust in Wall Street. So, yes, for Puerto Rico's sake, let's take on Wall Street. Now more than ever, we need to hold them accountable. And I believe that this agenda is exactly what we need. We must close the tax loophole for the very hedge fund managers that are holding Puerto Rico hostage. Make Wall Street pay their fair share to help rebuild our aging infrastructure and improve access to health care. Reform the mega banks so that everyday Americans are not on the hook for Wall Street risky activities. Bring real investor protection to the island, including applying the 1940 Investment Company Act, which I am working to do through legislation as we speak. Puerto Rico and the territories are the only place in the United States of America without such protection. And making sure that hedge funds' investment decisions are transparent for all the world to see. The truth is that the 3.5 million Americans that live in Puerto Rico have already suffered enough at the hands of Wall Street. Now is the time to have their back and take on Wall Street. Just do that. I am with you. I'm ready to roll my sleeve and bring fairness to consumers and workers in this country. Thank you for giving me the time.
Thank you, Congressman, for being here. So we are going to be taking on Wall Street in the halls of Congress and also in communities around the country, and I'm really excited to have our next speaker come up. Her name is Maribel Touré. She is a member of New York Communities for Change, and she is no stranger to fighting Wall Street. Back in 2008, Maribel was on the verge of foreclosure, but she fought tooth and nail to save her home. And as an elected trustee of a school district that's overcrowded and underfunded, Maribel knows better than anyone why we need Wall Street to pay their fair share. Welcome, Maribel.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Maribel Ture. I'm just a simple citizen who was living their life with my husband, raising my kids, and creating my own family. I was saving, working hard, studying hard, and saving enough to buy my house. Everything was going good until Wall Street decided to go extra greedy, as they normally go, and came with all this crash in 2008. My husband lost his job as 65% of all the architects in New York, and I was involved in an accident, and my daughter was her time to go to college. Here, a regular citizen making the decision, the unfair decision, to choose to pay my mortgage or to send my daughter to college. I choose for education. I choose for spend my money to college. And it's when all my troubles started. The government helped the Wall Street, the government helped the banks, and they create the modification. They refused to help me. I went back to work. We did never recuperate the whole income that we used to have, but I was able to pay my mortgage back again if they helped me with my mortgage, with my modification. They refuse and refuse and refuse. And the worst thing that they were doing is shifting the guilt on the consumers, which should not be. For a lot of time, I was feeling guilty and was feeling ashamed, but it was not my fault. I never started working, and I never started paying the tax. The same tax that the government was giving them to help them, but they were not helping the people. They didn't care how many people was losing their house. My town, who was on a minority community, at one point was looking like a ghost town. Every day we were seeing houses being boarded. Every day we were seeing families vanish from the community. And I decided that I was not going to be one of them. I joined New York Communities for Change because they don't only fight to fight Wall Street, but they fight for education, for better pay, for better health insurance, every single thing that a working person deserves. So since then, I've been working with them, and we decided to put a fight against Chase, the same Chase bank that is giving billions of dollars to the CEO, but that they never pay back the government when the government gave them the money that belongs to the workers. We decided to push for our mayor in our town to close the banks, the accounts with Chase, and we won. We convinced them and we closed the accounts to put pressure to help the people, and we won. We won. At that moment, they knew who the family Ture was, and at that moment, they found the papers that they always were lost or incomplete for the modification, and they finally found out who was my mortgage manager, and they modified my mortgage. And I was able to stay in my house until today. I refuse to give up, and I think if I could won that fight, this fight, especially now that we have people in Congress helping us, we can do it. We just need to keep fighting all together. We can do it all together. Thank you.
So we've been taking on the Goliaths of the world as part of this campaign, and I'm now introducing Bobby Tolbert, and I'm honored to introduce him. He has been HIV positive since 1995 and became a member of Vocal New York in 2005. He was formerly homeless in the New York City shelter system and has worked for much of the past decade as a peer health educator in the Bronx and in Brooklyn. A longtime activist for social justice, he has led Vocal New York campaigns to expand syringe access, prevent overdose deaths, and hold Wall Street accountable for the financial crisis. And he currently serves as secretary on the board of People's Action. Very glad to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As she said, my name is Bobby Talbert. I am on the board of directors of Vocal New York, so that means I can get pretty vocal, pretty loud and boisterous. So if I rant, please feel free to tell me to shut up. But I'm also on the board of directors for People's Action. So that means that you have to actually listen to me before you tell me to shut up. So I don't think I can add too much to what has already been said by all of these great leaders here today. But I do want to be a part of the conversation. And I do realize that it's very difficult to survive on an economy that is in crisis. Infrastructure is crumbling. Opportunities for employment and education are nearly non-existent. And our social safety net is just a consideration. So then just think about somebody living with HIV. Multiply those issues by 10. And then you begin to realize the impact that Wall Street has had on the most vulnerable Americans. In buying our government and creating their own rules of engagement, these gamblers on Wall Street have been in direct violation of our values as Americans. So when life-sustaining medications and treatments cannot be accessed because some hedge fund clipper or hedge funders have jacked up the prices so high that it's beyond our means, it becomes problematic. And when our basic needs like housing, education, and supportive services have been neglected because there are no funds to support them, then we need to know where our money is. So if a person is newly diagnosed and finds out that they can't get the medication because their insurance won't cover the cost, and working families can't make ends meet because their wages are not in parity with the cost of living, and at the same time, some hedge funder is raking in millions and taking advantage of carried interest loopholes and paying less taxes than anybody in this room, I take it personal. And that's why I appreciate people like Richard Trump and Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Keith Ellison, who know the value of a dollar and how much it can help us to get a level playing field in our economy. And being on the board of People's Action, we also have a plan. We have a 40-year plan to create an economy that works, to work on clean air and clean environment, to stop these payday lenders. And I want to be a part of that conversation. Anybody in this room, people know me, they know I have a reputation of always being in a fight. I'm not afraid of a fight. And I live on ground zero of Wall Street. I live right there at Corporate Central. And I'll scout it out for you while you all come in and take it on. I'm ready to have that fight at any time, and you can take that to the bank. That is a reputation.
Thank you. I'm Mike Lux. I'm president of the board of American Family Voices. And we have, from the very beginning, worked with Elizabeth Warren and all of you on Wall Street issues, and we're delighted to see this new, energized, pumped up, excited coalition come together. And I'm going to introduce a couple of more speakers. We just heard a board member from People's Action, but we've also got today Fred Ascarati, who is a co-director of People's Action Institute, a new organization formed by an alliance formed by a merger of Alliance for Just Society, National People's Action, and U.S. Action, with the last of which Fred was the executive director, and I served on his board. People's Action works with over 45 affiliates in 30 states across the country, united by a fierce commitment to protecting human dignity, respect for the planet, and ready to create new systems that advance racial, gender, and economic equity.
We're back. Actually, you know, the truth is we never really left. Because the impact on our members and communities of Wall Street greed run amok continues to be devastating. From home foreclosures to the loss of good-paying government and union jobs, our communities have suffered because of the runaway greed of the financial sector. We've seen wages remain stagnant as hedge fund managers and CEOs live lives of exorbitant luxury. Together, our families have lost trillions of dollars in wealth, and many of the communities that were hit hard where people's action works were hit hardest. Communities of color, with African American families losing more than half of their net worth as a result of Wall Street's addiction to profits at any cost. Too many have been forced to turn to predatory payday and car title lenders just to pay their bills. These low-life lenders charging up to 300% interest, preying on consumers who are struggling to just get by. And our kids have been saddled with tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt just to get an education so they can have a shot at a better life. You know, as Bobby Tolbert just told you, it's really about life and death in many of our communities. It's no wonder that when we talk to our members across the country, more and more people are getting angry and are demanding that more be done to stop Wall Street greed. They're ready to stand up and demand a new deal, a fair deal to take on Wall Street. You know, we saw this when we took thousands of our members to Wall Street and K Street in 2010. We saw it when millions of people took to parks, town squares, and city halls to occupy Wall Street, and we're seeing it again in this election cycle as populist outrage against corporate greed is driving more and more voters to the polls. They know that Wall Street still calls the shots and pockets the profits while our families scrape by. Now is the time not to tinker. Now is the time to fight for a new economy, a fair economy that works for all of us. It's time for government to act to stop the abuses of Wall Street. So together, we're going to work to build an economy that ensures that Wall Street works for Main Street. Today, we put them on notice that the days of runaway Wall Street greed are over. We're done with them patting their pockets on the backs of working and poor people in our communities. So today, we take on Wall Street here in DC and across the country. Thank you.
And now I have the special honor of introducing my dear friend Leo Henry. Leo is a co-chair of the Task Force on Jobs Creation. He's the founder of Jobs First 2012. You can see he's into jobs, which is why he's willing to take on Wall Street. And he's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. He's the managing partner of Intermedia Partners and the former CEO of AT&T Broadband and his predecessors, Telecommunications Inc. and Liberty Media. He's in the Cable TV Hall of Fame. He is one of the best business CEOs of his generation, and is also a great fighter for jobs and for justice. And when we were talking and planning this about, we really wanted a business person to be part of this coalition. Leo was the first name that came up, and everybody was really excited that he was willing to come down from New York and join us.
Never, ever follow Elizabeth Warren and Rich Trump. My comments are going to be very brief. It's important for all of us to understand that the issues that are being addressed and put forward are not on the backs of anybody today but the middle class. These reforms are imperative. You're going to hear a ton of criticism that we're abusing the American capitalist system in proposing them. Let me just give you some flavor for what we are proposing. 70% of the financial trading of securities in this country is done by speculators. It has nothing to do with the fabric of our nation. So when Elizabeth Warren and Rich Trumka said that we're gonna have a financial transactions tax, the only outcome will be to put a dampening effect on these speculative trading. It will have no effect, by design, it will have no effect on the middle class. It will have no effect on the women and men in business who trade for the vitality of their businesses. It will only take out, as I said, dampen the speculation that we live with in rampant form every day. The number, and with all respect to Congressman Ellison, the number is about $100 billion of benefit to the U.S. Treasury every year from this. 30 nations in this world have financial transactions taxes, 11 of them in the European Union. This is nothing new. In fact, we had financial transaction taxes in this country until the mid-60s, when the power of business began to erode them and elevate themselves. Carried interest reform is a particular concern to me. It's a concern because 2,000 women and men in this entire country, mostly men, steal from the middle class, steal from our U.S. Treasury, $10 to $12 billion a year. A staggering number. We heard from one of the council members of Congress about recapturing one time $12 billion. This happens every year. 650 people in New York State, where I live, make $3.7 billion more than they would if they paid fair taxation. I'm a believer in capital gains taxation. We need women and men to invest in the vitality of this country, or we need our companies to invest in the vitality of this country to create jobs. What we don't need is 2,000 women and men making $10 to $12 billion every year since 1985 on the backs of the middle class. You're going to hear all kinds of pushback on this one. You're going to hear that the numbers I quoted are wrong. They're verifiably not wrong. You're going to hear that we will, again, dampen job creation in this country. None of these 2,000 women and men themselves create jobs. The companies in which they invest create jobs, but they don't create any jobs. These are simply women and men who manage other people's monies, while other people in this economy manage businesses of all sorts and pay 35% taxation. These women and men pay 15%. CEO compensation. It's not just the loophole that Elizabeth Warren shared with us, where there are ways to avoid taxation on the performance-based bonuses that go to a handful of women and men. It's the reality, as we heard from President Trumka, that the average public company chief executive in this nation makes 335 times what his or her average employee makes. 335 times. 10 times more than any CEO comparable number in any of the developed nations. So in addition to closing the loophole on CEO compensation, we should be taxing egregiously all compensation above some reasonable multiple of earnings relative to their average employee. I don't know what that number is, but it's a lot less than 335. The point I'm trying to make here is a simple one, and we've heard it so personally from women and men that we've listened to earlier. This is about fundamental fairness. It's about purposeful theft and fundamental fairness. We steal billions and billions and billions of dollars for a handful of women and men, and we penalize 318 million women and men for that privilege. So thank you, Mike, for having me here. These are important issues. I'm deeply touched by some of the comments we've heard this afternoon. We really do need to follow the lead of the Congresspeople. Nydia, who's an old friend from New York, Keith Ellison, whom I've spent a lot of time on civil rights issues with, and of course the irrepressible, indomitable Elizabeth Warren. So I wish you well. We'll be there, as we've heard in other directions, we'll be there every step of the way. This upcoming Congress is our shot. We're going to take back the Senate. We're going to elect Hillary Clinton president. We're going to come close to a majority in the House. This is the time to close these abuses, and we'll be there with you when you try. Thank you for the privilege, Michael.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Kahn. I'm the organizing director at the Strong Economy for All Coalition. I just want to say that it's an honor and it's a pleasure to stand with so many leaders from around the country in taking on hedge funds and taking on Wall Street. Up next is David Boris. Over 30 years ago, David and his wife Carrie began the pursuit of their American dream. All they had was hope for a chance at success doing what they loved. And 31 years later, Hell's Kitchen Catering has become a fixture in Chicago. Wall Street has rigged our financial system, so much so that it has taken a heavy toll on Main Street. And so many Americans are now priced out at an opportunity at their American dream. David is here standing up today for those people. Please welcome David Boris.
Thank you. Well, thanks, Charles. Thanks for the nice introduction. Thanks for having me at the kickoff of the Take on Wall Street campaign. I'm David Boris. I own Hell's Kitchen Catering, also a proud member of the executive board of the Main Street Alliance. So we employ nearly 40 full-time and over 90 part-time and seasonal workers. Small businesses are the driving engine of our economy. We produce more than half of all the jobs and economic output in the United States and have created over 60% of the net new jobs in this country since 1995. But all too frequently, we're asked to perform this critical function with one hand tied behind our back. Let me explain. All businesses, large and small, must make a profit or we wouldn't be in business. All businesses, large and small, work at their craft, and at the end of the month and the year, total it all up and strive to see the fruits of our labors expressed on the bottom line. That's the American way. But here is where the similarities end. While large multinational corporations collect billions in taxpayer-funded subsidies, small businesses like mine operate the old-fashioned way. We pay our fair share in taxes. We don't attempt to unfairly augment our piece of the pie by cheating our fellow citizens out of theirs. We do not employ armies of high-priced lobbyists, accountants, and tax lawyers to devise ways to effectively cheat our communities and the American people out of the resources necessary to sustain the common good. We contribute our fair share of the tax dollars that get reinvested in our local communities that sustain tens of millions of small businesses and working people from coast to coast. In 1984, the year I signed my first lease for Hell's Kitchen Catering, the average CEO pay in this country was 40 times the average rank and file worker. And as we've heard 3 times already today, that ratio is 335 times. It's an increase of over 700%. While CEO compensation has increased nearly 1,000% between 1978 and 2014, workers' wages have grown a paltry 10% in that same 36-year period. This hurts small business, who require a healthy economy circulating dollars widely in a virtuous cycle of rising wages, consumer demand, and most importantly, job creation. What we do not need is the largest corporations in the country internalizing their profits while asking taxpayers to pick up the tab by incentivizing hefty bonus pay through tax deductions that subsidize exorbitant CEO salaries. We must level the playing field now for small businesses by making it harder for corporations who focus only on profits to dodge their tax responsibility. That's why we need to support the Stop Subsidizing Multi-Million-Dollar Corporate Bonuses Act. It's time for the largest of businesses who operate in the United States to pay their fair share. There are several other important issues that unfairly target small business, but one of the most flagrant is predatory lending and access to capital. Access to credit is a major issue for small business owners and their employees alike. Too many unbanked and underbanked working folks are only one accident or one emergency away from insolvency. And there are far too few avenues for them to get the short-term help they need to bridge the gap. Predatory lenders unscrupulously fill that vacuum, and they can wreak havoc on communities and individuals. I know this because I've seen employees who need a little bit of short-term cash to get through a tough patch get sucked into debt traps. That's why
I decided a long time ago to help my employees avoid payday entitled lenders by offering to advance pay and make short-term loans to them at 0 interest. And when owners of small businesses are forced to rely on high-interest merchant cash advances to cover temporary cash flow shortages, it diverts valuable resources away from business expansion and investment where it belongs. While many states have shut down predatory payday lenders, it's time for federal legislation to end the practice permanently in the United States. Merchant cash advance payday entitled lenders are predators who've made my employees and my customer base, the very people that my success hinges on, their prey. We need to address this systemic structural problem so that the lifeblood of small businesses have access to safe and affordable credit. Predatory lenders and tax-avoidant corporations work in concert to extract wealth from my community, leaving my business, my employees, and my customers trapped in a perpetual cycle of debt and forced to absorb a larger than necessary share of what is supposed to be our joint tax responsibility. It's time to usher in a new set of rules that reins in predatory lending, holds corporations accountable to pay their fair share, and returns the wealth of communities to the consumers that drive small business growth. Thanks for having me.
Up next is Ana Maria Archila. Ana joins us today as the co-executive director of the Center for Popular Democracy. But even before then, she has been fighting for an America that can work from all of us as the co-director of Make the Road New York, as well as the director of the Latin American Integration Center. Since immigrating to the US from Colombia at the age of 17, she has been a leading advocate for communities in need. Today, she's continuing that fight to take on Wall Street. Please welcome Ana Maria Archila.
Good afternoon. How are you all? Is that how we're going to take Wall Street? I don't think so, actually. So how are you? Ready to take on Wall Street? All right. It's a real honor to be here with all of you. It's a real honor to be here with President Trumka, with Maribel, with Bobby, with David, with so many people that have put really real equity in the fight against Wall Street predation. So my name is Ana Maria Archila. I'm the co-executive director of the Center for Popular Democracy. We are a network of 43 state organizations in 30 states. The community organizations that are in our network are rooted in Black and brown communities, in immigrant neighborhoods, in white working class towns. They are rooted in the corners of America that have suffered the most from the recklessness of Wall Street and its disproportionate power on our economy and our democracy. But together, these organizations represent over 500,000 people who have chosen to fight back. Our neighborhoods are still reeling from the havoc of Wall Street. We've heard the stories. We've heard Maribel's story. And that they continue to face the consequences of the foreclosure crisis. Millions of families lost their homes and were left to pick up the pieces with very, very little help. Many Black and brown communities saw their wealth almost entirely wiped out. But the members of organizations like New York Communities for Change, like ACE in California, New Jersey Communities United, Neighborhoods Organizing for Change in Minneapolis, and many others were at the forefront of fighting against Wall Street at that time in 2008 and 2009 with many of you. They did things like occupy their homes. They stayed in their homes even when the banks were evicting them. They marched in Washington. They flooded the streets of their cities and their towns, and they stood fiercely in their dignity to protect their families and communities. And we know that the fight is not over. Even though we won many reforms, and Senator Warren spoke about the important reforms that we were collectively able to win at that time, we are still far from having rules that truly, truly force Wall Street to contribute its fair share and to limit its influence on our economy and our democracy. And we are still very far from making sure that communities that lost their wealth during the Great Recession are not at the mercy of the same predatory institutions that as they're trying to rebuild. So working families, especially Black and Latino communities, continue to be the food of Wall Street greed. All of us here and the folks organizing back home have set out today to change the rules so that communities of color have a fair shot at achieving economic stability, so that white working class communities across the country know that our government will stand with them, not with the men leading banks and hedge funds. So the reforms that we're advancing today are very common sense. Make Wall Street pay fair share, end tax evasion, end too big to fail, and ridiculous CEO bonuses, and expand access to fair and equitable banking for communities and not predatory lending. So I'm here because I hope that our politicians in this town will take swift action to make these reforms a reality. But I know, and you know, that it's not going to be enough for us to have this event. We're going to have to fight and fight really, really hard. We're not going to be asking, we're going to be demanding, we're going to take this fight everywhere. We will fill our local and elected offices, we will fill our state houses, we will flood the streets again and again and again until we have an economy that works for all of us. And we will continue to expose not just the institutions, but the individuals, the people who have names, who are making billions lining their pockets with bets against our communities. Working with our allies from the Hedge Clippers campaign, we are exposing the influence of hedge funds in nearly every facet of our economy. We are exposing the role that hedge funds and mutual funds have in making Puerto Rico be in the situation that it is right now, and making the people of Puerto Rico hold the bag as they enrich themselves. And we're working to make sure that to expose those individuals, those 25 hedge fund managers who make more in a year than all the kindergarten teachers combined in our country. There are people out there who make a lot more than all of the kindergarten teachers, the people that are teaching our kids combined. So we're calling their names and we're exposing their greed. This is a fight that's for our families. This is a fight for our future, and it is a fight that we will win together. So thank you so much for launching this campaign and for being in this fight with all of us.
All right. So last, not least, as president of the 1.6 million member American Federation of Teachers, Randy Weingarten has never shied away from a fight. She's not going to start now. She's a national progressive leader and an active member of the Democratic National Committee. She couldn't physically be here today because of a commitment in New York, but we know, and I'm sure you know, that she's ready to take on Wall Street. Joining us by video, Randy Weingarten.
President of the 1.6 million member AFT. I'd like to thank all of you who have come together to make this country a fairer and a more just place for all America's working families. With your help, the AFT has been taking on hedge fund and private equity managers, the Kochs, and yes, the Trumps. Because the uber rich are doing more than making a buck. They're destabilizing and rigging our economic system on the backs of hard-working American families. But this is not just about the moguls on Wall Street. It's also about fighting to unrig both our democratic and economic systems so our country gives working people, not just the 1%, a shot at fairness and prosperity. It's about leveraging our power, people power, to take practical steps like divesting from hedge funds and closing the carried interest loophole to make Wall Street work for Main Street, not the other way around. Income inequality in America is the greatest it's been since the AFT's founding 100 years ago in 1916. The top 25 hedge fund managers in America make more money than all the kindergarten teachers in America combined. This growing inequality condemns families to poverty, forecloses on dreams, and tarnishes the American ideal. But those at the top want to preserve the status quo, which creates a small number of winners and many, many, many losers. Take hedge funds. Together with the Roosevelt Institute, we've shown that hedge funds can be a really bad investment. Hedge funds have evaded their taxes and pushed for deregulation that has left some of the most powerful corporations operate as they please. Our friends at hedge clippers are fighting back and holding hedge funds accountable. And pension funds are also taking action. The New York City Employees Pension Fund, NYSERS, voted to divest their $1.5 billion hedge fund allocation last month, and other funds are preparing to reject this failed investment model as well. But our hard work doesn't come without a cost. There's an all-out war on working folks, on those who want checks, on unchecked power, on unions and our progressive allies, on our values and the people we advocate for. Because the rich and mighty know that if they hobble us, they can silence workers, and their upper hand will become an iron fist. We're part of the fight to use our power in capital markets to create a fairer America for families and communities. And fight we will, because our opponents have made it clear that power never yields willingly. This fight will be long and hard, but together we can help reclaim the promise of America. Thank you.
All right. So, last but not least, sorry, I'm lost for a moment. All right.
That's all right, I don't need it.
It's okay.
I don't need
Last but not least, I'll do it off the top of my head. I'm very pleased to introduce Sarah. You can pronounce your last name. Steffens. There we go. That was the only part I didn't know. The Secretary Treasurer of the Communications Workers of America. And as you know, the communications workers are involved in an important and pressing strike right now that involves many of the kinds of issues of basic economic fairness that we're talking about today. So in the midst of that busyness, we are especially excited that they are able to join us, and also excited about the ways in which they've really led the way in communicating with their members and really working and thinking about the conversation about the role of Wall Street in our economy into their work in such an integrated way. So we thank you for your leadership and appreciate your being here. And before I turn the microphone over to you, I also just want to thank everyone for the work that they've done in putting this event together, and for the work that we will do together in making this campaign work.
Thanks. I promise to keep this really short. So we at CWA have seen firsthand the devastating effects when corporations care only about their bottom lines. It really hurts working families. It's never about human beings, it's only about shareholder value. Our economy is not working for working families, it's only working for Wall Street. I spent many years in the newspaper industry, and I can tell you that it's been devastated by hedge funds. A lot of people don't know that a hedge fund is the second largest newspaper owner in our nation right now. And I think it's outrageous that a reporter would be paying a higher tax rate than the hedge fund owner who is cutting his pay and devastating his newsroom and the community that depends on that news coverage. It doesn't have to be like this, as you've all heard. Together, we can take back our economy and we can take back our democracy. Together, we can end special treatment for the billionaire class and restore to our country the middle class for millions of working families who depend on good jobs. We have great allies and we have the people on our side, so we know it's going to be a long haul, but we at CWA are all in, and I think everybody else in this room is as well. So let's go take on Wall Street. Thank you.
Again, thanks very much all for being here, and we'll see you in the next round.